Bonjour à tous pour ce deuxième séminaire en ligne de biostatistique du Centre de recherche Bordeaux Population Health. Et donc aujourd'hui, c'est Quentin Clairon, qui est postdoc dans l'équipe système du centre, qui va nous faire une présentation. Donc Quentin, je te laisse la parole.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you to all to being remotely there. So I will present a joint work we made about the development of a regularization method based on optimal control theory for the problem of parameter estimation in ordinary differential equations mixed effect model. So first of all, I will briefly recall in what kind of model we are interested in. What is a statistical problem related to this kind of model? Then I will illustrate on a simple example which problem could face the classic method used to estimate parameter in this kind of model, and then present a method we propose to circumvent this problem, a method based on optimal control theory. Then I will compare on a real data set and a simulated data set our methods and a classic maximum likelihood approach. So first of all, we are interested by a nonlinear mixed effect model, where at the subject level here, the behavior of each individual, each subject, is modeled by a d-dimensional ordinary differential equation. This kind of model is here to say that we assume that the evolutions of each patient follow the same rule, despite the fact that we can observe in the end different motion. So in order to take into account the fact that each subject in the population could show some differences, we assume that we have here in the definition of the model subject-specific parameters BI, different initial condition, that is to say when the different subjects are observed at the first time, they can show different value for the state variable. And thirdly, to take into account difference between the subjects, we integrate into the model definition the possibility of covariate function, that is to say, or covariate value, that is to say, random variable or random function, which are subject-specific values. But still, we are in a population framework. So we assume that we have here a parameter which is common to the whole population. Secondly, to still preserve the population nature of the model, we assume that the subject-specific parameter, BI, cannot take every arbitrary value. There is some homogeneity. That is, they are distributed according to a law which is defined at the population level. Here we assume that the subject-specific parameter follow a centered normal law, so which is totally determined by the variance-covariance matrix C. So we are interested in this kind of model, and our statistical problem will be the following. We want to estimate the true population parameter, that is to say here, the true feature stars, that is to say the population parameter, as well as the variance-covariance matrix, which actually describes the dispersion of the subject-specific parameter. And we want to estimate the true realization of the subject-specific parameter as well. And we want to do that in a classic framework in statistics. That is to say, we want to do so by starting with, noisy, partial, and discrete observation of each patient. So the observations are given here under the form of a random variable. With here a matrix C, which is an observation matrix, which is here to emphasize the fact that we can be in a partially observed framework. That is, we maybe cannot have access to observation for all the state variables, maybe just a subset of them. And secondly, obviously, the observations are corrupted with some measurement error here given by the epsilon. Why are we interested in this kind of model? Because they are particularly relevant for the analysis of biological data and especially for clinical trial. Why? Because generally in this kind of setting, you want to make some inference at the population level, but starting with very few time points for the subjects, but with an important number of subjects. So in order to merge observation coming from different subjects, in order to draw a conclusion at a relevant level, at the population level, but still taking into account the fact that every patient show differences. We use this kind of non-linear mixed effect model. So here, for example, we present a model developed by Chloé Pazin et al. Used to model the evolution of the humoral response after Ebola vaccine injection. In this model, they primarily assume that the antibody is secreted by two kinds of antibody secreting cells, namely the short-lived and the long-lived. In order to define this model with three components, three state variables, we introduce the following parameters. So the rho S and rho L, which are the production rates of antibodies for the two antibody secreting cells, and the deltas, which are the loss rates or the degradation rates for the different biological components. And primarily, a statistical problem will be the following. Starting from a simple version of this model, where here the short-lived and the long-lived has been replaced by their analytical solution. We want to estimate the parameter of the model, starting from observation coming from different patients, coming from different cohorts. So we propose this model, but in order to take into account some subject-specific variation among the patients, we parameterize the model in order that the different parameters have patient-specific values. To do so, we'll consider here theta, which will be the mean value across all population of the log transform of the parameter. Here, the log transform is used to enforce positiveness of the parameter. But for each patient, we will allow that there is some discrepancy with respect to the mean value of the parameter. That is why we have introduced here the different BI, which are discrepancy at the population, at the subject level, sorry, for the different parameter value. And our statistical problem will be how to estimate the subject-specific parameter, the BI, but more importantly, the population-specific parameter, that is to say the log mean value of the parameter given here by the theta. And we want also to estimate the dispersion of the subject-specific parameter, that is to say the matrix C here. And we want to do so starting from observation coming from the patient, observation regarding the antibodies concentration up to 1 year after the vaccine injection. So all in all, it's a classic problem of parameter estimation in a nonlinear mixed effect model. Here, the specific feature is the fact that we do not have access to the form of the regression function because it's defined in an implicit way as a solution of an ODE. But by using the proper numerical solver, you can replace this regression function by a numerical approximation. And indeed, this kind of approach has been implemented in monoliths such as Nimrod or Monolix or DiffMem. And basically, they implemented frequentist method. For example, when you try to estimate or reconstruct the likelihood function and then you optimize it by using some approximation, some stochastic approximation, or Bayesian method, where you try to reconstruct the whole a posteriori distribution of the observation given the parameter, or you just focus on the maximum a posteriori. So this method exists and they have been employed during the last, I think, 15 years at least. But why do we want to propose something else here? Because they are what we call exact method, in the sense that they do not take into account model misspecification during the inference process. That is, they do rely on the exact definition of the model for the estimation of the parameter without taking into account the fact that maybe this model could be wrongly specified. And it is known that presence of model misspecification dramatically impairs the estimation accuracy for this kind of exact method. And presence of model misspecification is rather the rule than the exception in a model used in statistics and especially for biological processes. Why? Because here, first of all, we use continuous deterministic model. it is known that most of biological processes involve discrete quantity and which interact in a stochastic way. And ODE are useful approximation when the population is important enough, in the sense that in this case, the mean population has a meaning. And if the interaction and the reaction between the subjects happen in a smooth way, and in this case, you can define a mean change or a mean speed. And in this case, the approximation, deterministic approximation are theoretically grounded, but they are still approximation. More specifically here in population framework, we know that even though the model is well defined at the population level, you cannot take everything into account at the subject specific level. You have exogenous terms, some specific feature which act on the dynamic of each patient, which simply cannot be taken into account for statistical inference. Otherwise, your model will be too complex. And thus, you need to make simplifying assumptions. Just here, for example, if I resume the model I presented in an introduction, Chloé Pazin et al. Already obtained an estimation, and we already have access to observation. Here, what I want to do is to estimate the UI, that is to say, the forcing term. It is not a measurement error. It is more given already estimated value for the parameter and given available data, what kind of forcing term do I need to apply to the model in order to reproduce the observation for each patient? So for each patient in the cohort used for the estimation, I will compute this term UI and plot it on the observation interval. And what I obtain for each patient is this kind of profile. So obviously it's not that far from 0. And when we took the average perturbation, so the perturbation average on the whole set of patients in the population, we'll see later that is not significantly different from 0. So at the population level, the model is good, but still at the subject level, this perturbation exists. The model is not perfect, or at least we commit some error, and it will have an impact on the estimation accuracy. And we need to take that into account. But this kind of error at the subject level, it's not the only source of model misspecification in our framework, in our population framework. First, you have the problem of error measurements in covariates. As I said, in order to take into account some specific feature of the patient, one way is to integrate some subject-specific function, or more exactly, function which have a value which is specific to each subject. The problem is that in most of cases, these covariates are obtained up to some measurement error. You are generally in a statistical framework, and when you measure this kind of covariate, you commit some you commit some measurement error. The problem is when you inject directly these covariates, you turn what was just a statistical problem of measurement error into a structural problem of model error. And it is known to have a way more dramatic impact on the accuracy of the estimation. Secondly, you have the problem of due to the sequential nature of inference method. In most of cases, method used for estimating parameter in a population model generally rely on a pre-existing estimation for the population parameter to proceed to the estimation of the subject-specific parameter. But still, since you could always commit estimation error at the population level, you will automatically, nearly automatically, rely on a wrongly specified model in order to estimate the subject-specific parameter. And thirdly, something which is maybe more specific to dynamical model than population model, but it's a problem for us here. It's a problem of initial condition. Generally, you need to estimate them as nuisance parameter. We said nuisance parameter because basically you don't need their value in order to answer to the biological question you primarily design your model to answer to. But still, in order to estimate theta, you need to estimate the initial condition as well. And that's a problem because either you need to estimate them and you will increase the optimization problem dimension, and in a dramatic way, because you will have to estimate initial condition for each subject. Or you can make assumption on their values. But as any assumption, it will be a simplifying assumption, and it will be another cause of model misspecification. Just to give an example, for the analysis of patients with HIV, people usually make the assumption that the patients are near the equilibrium point, because they say, okay, the patients arrive in the cohorts of study after a long time of being ill. So their immune system is near an equilibrium point. But first of all, you can never know for sure. And secondly, there is a possibility that the immune system is an oscillatory process, and you are never at the actual steady state value, but you oscillate around it. So when you actually make the assumption that you are near the equilibrium point, you actually can be in practice far from it, but just oscillate around it. So that's all I've described are cause of model misspecification. And as I said, it's a problem for classic method, exact method, because they can dramatically impair the accuracy of estimation. But that's not the only problem faced by classic method for estimation in this kind of dynamical model. Generally, or often, let's say, your problem of estimation in dynamical model is ill-posed. And that's a problem faced by classic method. Why? Because classic method, like I said, are exact method. They are unbiased. That means that on average, you will reach the true value for the parameter when you estimate them. But it comes with a price to pay in terms of variance. It is known, that's known as the Cramer-Rao bound, that any unbiased method, so exact method, produce estimator with a variance which cannot go below a given threshold. The price to pay for unbiasedness is to have at least a minimal level of variance. And we can see that this minimal level of variance is actually linked to the model sensitivity to parameter. When the model is not sensitive to a parameter, the Cramer-Rao bound could be really important and could lead, in practice, the estimator to have a huge variance. That means that if you make a small perturbation on your data, you can end up with a dramatic effect on the estimated parameter value. And the problem is, in dynamical model, presence of poorly identifiable parameter is rather the rule than the exception. Here on the model I give an example, a very simple one with only one state variable, so everything is observed, obviously. And with not that much parameter, you still have poorly identifiability issues. First of all, delta L, which is the degradation rate of the long-lived cell, cannot be estimated with the data we get so far. That is to say, data up to 1 year after the vaccine injection, because this parameter has a long-term effect. And with the data we get, we do not have enough information to actually estimate them. But maybe more problematic for dynamical system is the problem of joint estimation of different parameters, because some of them could have compensating effects. Here, for example, it's the case for Phi-S, which is the influx of antibodies coming from the short-lived cell, and delta S, the degradation rate of the short-lived. Why do we have problem of compensating effects? Issues here. In order to represent that, let us plot what is known as the sensitivity graph of the parameter. Here we plot on this graph, each curve corresponds to each model parameter and represents the influence of each model parameter on the model response. And one can see that here in red and here in green, which correspond to these two parameters, these two curves are nearly symmetric along the x-axis. So they have symmetric effects on the model outcome. So for example, if you have one antibody concentration profile for one patient, if you took an arbitrary value for Phi-S, you can find another value, a corresponding value for delta S, which will nearly produce this antibody concentration profile. So it will be complicated with data to actually isolate one couple for this parameter, one couple of value. And so it will lead to a problem of estimation in practice. And it will lead to maybe dramatic increase of the variance for exact method. So these two reasons, model error and problem of ill-posedness due to poorly identifiable parameter, leads us to propose something else. What is the rationale for this? The problem I just described, so model error and poorly identifiability issues, are actually known in the framework of parameter estimation in ODE based on observation for one subject. And during at least the last 20 years, method has been proposed and kind of successfully to deal with these two problems. You have plenty of existing method, but they do all share one feature in the sense that they are approximation method, at the contrary to the exact method we just talked about. By approximation method, we mean that we do not try to estimate perfectly the solution of the ODE. Instead, we rely on an approximation of the ODE solution. Why we do so? Why all of this method proceed this way? Because it has several advantages. First of all, when you took into account in your approximation of the ODE solution the potential presence of model error, you limit its impact and its damage on the estimation accuracy. So in presence of model error, it's useful to use an approximation of the ODE solution instead of the true ODE solution. Secondly, generally, the obtained approximation of the ODE solution is more simple. So you commit some bias, but still it is expected to have a smoother dependence with respect to the model parameter. And it is known to improve the problem of variance explosion I just talked to you about in presence of poorly identifiable parameter. At the expense of bias, it could be useful to use an approximation of the ODE solution with a smoother dependence with respect to model parameter. And thirdly, some of this method could propose an estimate of the ODE solution, which actually do not need to know the initial condition to be estimated. So what we propose here is to pick one of the proposed methods so far in the setting of one subject, and we try to extend it in the framework of a whole population problem. So we took a method which has been developed and based on optimal control theory to propose an estimation method for population model, which mitigates the effect of model misspecification, deal with the presence of poorly identifiable parameters, and we do so by avoiding the need to estimate initial condition for the different subjects. So how do we proceed for the estimation now? As most of frequentist approach, it will be a nested estimation procedure, in the sense that in order to estimate the model, the parameter at the population level, that is to say the theta and the variance of the subject-specific parameter, we optimize what is known as an outer criteria. But generally, this outer criteria needs, at each time we move into the parameter space, to re-optimize criteria at the subject level, which are known to be inner criteria, in order to obtain an estimator for the subject-specific parameter, but also in order to re-estimate the ODE solution. So as an outer criteria to estimate the population parameter, we'll take something classic. We'll use an approximation of the log posterior distribution, but we'll make a lot of change for the inner criteria. In order to estimate the subject-specific parameter and the approximation of the ODE solution, we'll change the classic criteria in order to propose a criteria which took into account the presence of potential model error at the subject level, and which allow us to obtain an estimation without the need to estimate the initial condition for each subject. How can we proceed in practice? In order to explain that, let us resume the classic criteria to estimate a subject-specific parameter. Basically, for a frequentist method, they are based on the joint likelihood function of the data and of the subject-specific parameter. And indeed, if the initial conditions are not known, you need to optimize. Here we consider measurement error, which is normal, which is under this form or similar to this form. That is to say, one can say that we need to estimate the initial condition if they are not known with the classic criteria. So as a first step, as a first modification, our criteria will get rid of the estimation of the initial condition by doing something classic in statistics, that is by profiling on it. Our estimator will be defined as a minimizer of the cost already minimized on the set of possible initial conditions. So that, again, something classic in statistics to get rid of a nuisance parameter. But secondly, as we said, we want to take into account the presence of potential model error in order to at least mitigate, limit the damage of model error on estimation accuracy. To do so, we will rely on a relaxation and penalization scheme. By relaxation, we mean that now at the subject level, we'll consider that our regression function is not exactly solution of the ODE. It will be solution of a perturbation of the ODE. That is to say, each subject will be no solution to an ODE of this form, which is very similar to the original model, but with the addition of UE here, which is a perturbation, that is to say a function we assume to be square integrable. But then we need to penalize. Obviously, we cannot allow any perturbation for any subject, otherwise our model will be meaningless, even at the population level. So in order to penalize, that is, in order to get rid of unacceptable perturbation, we add a term to the data fitting criterion. The classic criteria is based on the data fitting criterion, this one, but to this term, we had this new term, which penalize perturbation of high magnitude, and we profile on it. That is to say, we don't want, as in the classic method, to propose as estimator for the BI the value which minimize the discrepancy between the ODE solution and the observation. But we want instead to define our estimator as the one which needs the smallest model error possible in order to explain the observation we get. So if I put back everything together in one pieces, I will formally define my estimator for the subject-specific parameter as the minimizer of this cost. That is to say, a cost which is sequentially profiled on the initial condition and also on the perturbation. So as I said, our estimator will be now defined as a parameter requiring the smallest model error to be the closest possible to the observation for each subject. So that's the formal definition of our estimator. But how can we compute that in practice? For this, we'll use another area of mathematics known as control theory, which propose actually a very relevant numerical tool to solve this kind of problem, this kind of optimization problem. In particular, in control theory, this problem of minimization on the perturbation is known as a tracking problem. And plenty of numerical devices have been developed to actually solve this in a computationally efficient way. Basically, what is a control problem, tracking problem here? A tracking problem aims to address the kind of following issue. You have a dynamical system in a given initial state, and you have a target signal. The question you aim to address is, what kind of inputs of minimal energy do I have to apply to the dynamical model in order to make it track or reach this target signal? That's exactly our problem here. The input of minimal energy here is our perturbation at the subject level, and the target signal as the observation for each patient. So I will not go into the detail, precise detail of the numerical device used in control theory, but just to describe a bit. When your ODE is linear with respect to the state variable, we know that our problem falls into the realm of the so-called linear quadratic theory, which is really useful and really powerful. Why? Because we know that our optimization problem here is well posed, in the sense that the solution with respect to U exists and is unique. And moreover, which is maybe more interesting for us as statisticians, we know how to compute it in practice. By the introduction of a so-called Riccati equation, we know that this, which is a optimization problem in infinite dimensional space, has a closed form, and we can compute it by, again, solving the so-called Riccati equation, which is just here a finite difference equation with a final time condition. So really easy to integrate. But we have a second interest of doing so, is the fact that thanks to the Riccati equation, this problem has a closed form, which is a quadratic form with respect to the initial condition. So thanks to the Riccati equation, we know how to express it in a way that we can easily optimize on the initial condition. Indeed, if this is a quadratic expression with respect to the initial condition, we have a closed form for the solution for the second problem, for the second optimization problem. That is to say, the optimization problem on the initial condition. So in the framework of linear model, optimal control theory allows us to solve this problem in a very efficient way. For non-linear problem, when the OG is non-linear, sorry, what we do is to rely on a method proposed 15 years ago, which is based on what is known as a pseudo-linear formulation of a non-linear problem. I will not go into the detail, but basically, we replace a non-linear problem by a sequence of a linear quadratic problem. So at the expense of more computational time, we can still retain the benefits of linear quadratic theory, even for non-linear models. That is to say, we know how to solve this, and we know how to solve this, and we know how to express it as a quadratic form with respect to the initial condition, even for non-linear problem. And so we can reasonably compute it in a reasonable amount of time. I mean. Okay, so that was the formal definition of our estimator, and also the practical detail about how to solve this optimization problem, defining our inner criteria. But we want to know how our method behave in practice, with comparison to classic maximum likelihood estimator, for example. For this, we'll rely on Monte Carlo simulation to compare our approach and a classic maximum likelihood approximation based on a stochastic approximation algorithm. And we'll compare the accuracy of our method based on measurement coming from 30 subjects, and for each of these subjects with 11 noisy measurements. We also consider that the initial conditions are generated in a random way. So by doing so, we will, as I said, I want to compute the mean square error as well as the empirical variance matrices. Oh, sorry, I have a problem with my screen. Okay, perfect. So yes, like I said, I want to compute the mean square error as well as the variance to see how the two methods behave comparatively. So what we can see here for the population parameter, θ3 and θ4, both methods does not show dramatic difference. Both parameters are accurately estimated. But we are more interested about what happened for θ1 and θ2. Because if you remember, it corresponds to the two parameters which face a problem of joint estimation. So we expect that it will be complicated, at least it will. Classic method will face some degradation issues in terms of estimation accuracy. And one can see that's actually the case for both methods, both in terms of mean square error and both in terms of variance. But as a regularization method, here we manage to at least limit the damage, and we cannot expect more from a regularization method. In particular, we manage to limit the damage for the increase of variance comparing to the parameter which are well estimated. Maybe in a more significant way, we can see that we dramatically diminish estimation error for the subject-specific parameter. And it was expected because, as I said, the estimation of subject-specific parameter by classic method rely on the pre-existing estimation for the population parameter. So you automatically commit model misspecification. And since our method does take into account such presence of model error, it was expected that we obtain better estimation in the end of the process. And since we estimate this parameter better, it was expected that we estimate their distribution better as well. Okay, second case. As we said, it was here in a well-specified case. But as we said, we want to see also what happened in a misspecified case. Because we know that it's rather the rule than the exception that this kind of misspecification appears in the data we use for parametric inference. Here, in order to reproduce misspecification existing in the observation, I will now generate the data according to a perturbed version of the assumed model at the population level. Here, the data will be generated according to this level, as the perturbation U is unknown and has been obtained from the sample I presented in introduction in order to actually mimic an actual observed cases. Here, just to give you an example, in red, we plot an unperturbed version of the model, so the solution of the original model, and in black, a realization of this model for a given realization of U bar. So we can see that the unperturbed model is actually a relevant one for the direct problem of prediction. But still, this perturbation will have an impact on the accuracy of the estimation. So if I resume the same experimental framework as before, and I compute again the mean square error and again the empirical variance, what can we see here? So basically, there is a similar pattern with a well-specified case, with a notable exception, here, that both methods face degradation. It was expected. The problem of estimation is here more complicated due to the misspecification presence. A slight difference still for θ3 and θ4. In the well-specified case, both methods show non-significant performance. Here, we can observe significant difference for θ3 and θ4. So even the fact that both methods degrade in presence of model misspecifications, we again manage to limit the damage comparing to an exact method. And it actually enlightens the benefits of using a regularization method in model of misspecification. We still face degradation, but in a less dramatic way. Okay, so just before I finished, a simple case of real data analysis, because we have seen just before that our method behaved well on misspecified case. So we want to see what happened on a real data case. So if I resume the same experimental or nearly the same experimental design, which was useful to obtain a pre-existing estimation and the data we used in order to estimate the forcing term I presented in introduction, I want to see what is the estimated value I obtain, because I know that estimation already obtained by Chloé Pazin et al. Is now considered as consistent thanks to subsequential analysis on new subjects. So as a benchmark, we want to see how our method behave with the existing estimation. So what we see here is we obtain pointwise value, which seems at first sight a bit far from the already obtained estimation. But if you see, if you look at the confidence interval, one can see that the confidence interval overlaps. So there is no significant difference for us between our value and the already estimated one. One can just notice a small difference for the psi, which has a variance of the subject-specific effect, because we use a slightly less important cohort of patients. So we use more homogeneous data. So it was expected in a way that the variance of the subject-specific parameter was less important. And indeed, if we plot the solution we obtain and the solution already obtained, one can see small difference at the beginning, but on the long term, here is just some example on some patient, the difference is not dramatic. So in terms of prediction, we obtain something which is very similar to what already exists. But prediction is not the only thing we are interested in. We are also interested by the committed error at the subject level. That's one of the main points of the method. It's to deal with this error, or at least to mitigate its effect. So we want to see what the model error look like at the subject level. If I plot the forcing term here, not for the estimation as presented in introduction, but for our estimation this time, here is the profile I obtained for every subject. But it's complicated to make comparison start on that by relying on that. So instead, here I plot on the right the mean perturbation obtained with our estimation, and on the left the mean estimation obtained with the already existing estimation. And I plot as well the confidence interval in red corresponding to both estimation method. So first of all, one can see that the perturbation, the mean perturbation equal to 0, so corresponding to a good model at the population level, is contained in the confidence interval for both estimations. So at the population level, the model seems relevant. However, confidence interval gives us extra information about perturbation at the subject level. One can see that the confidence interval for our estimation is narrower than the confidence interval obtained with the other estimation. That means that at the subject level, our estimation leads us to commit model error of smaller magnitude than the existing estimation. Okay, I will stop here just to make a brief summary. What we've seen here is a method to estimate parameter in a mixed effect model, non-linear mixed effect model based on a ODE. But this time, at the contrary to classic method, based on approximation of the model at the subject level. Why? Because we know it could be useful to mitigate the effect of model error on estimation accuracy. It could limit the increase of variance in presence of poorly identifiable parameter, and we can obtain this approximation by avoiding the need to estimate initial condition. So right now we have just applied our method in a classic, a simple model with one compartment, so totally observed. What we want to do in the near future, is to apply it on a more complex model with unobserved state variables. Because in this case, we think that our method or a method of this sort could be very valuable to the classic alternative. Why? Because when you have unobserved compartments, you increase the risk of model misspecification. And it's complicated to actually quantify the misspecification you commit on unmeasured compartments. Why? Because most of classic statistical criteria to assess model adequacy in the end up into an adequacy between model response and data. But if you do not have access to data, what can you do? The interest of our method here is the fact that we put a perturbation term even on an unobserved compartment. So by plotting the forcing term in the end of the process, we can also have a glimpse about the committed misspecification on the unobserved compartment. And secondly, the problem of initial condition for model with unobserved compartment is really crucial, because what kind of hypothesis could you make on the initial condition on the compartment you cannot observe? It could be useful to use a method such as ours, which actually bypass the need to make such hypothesis on the initial condition to proceed to the estimation of parameter of interest. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. Thank you for your attention. I can only imagine, actually.
Okay, thank you, Quentin. On peut faire les questions en français ou en anglais, hein, comme vous préférez. Donc, si vous avez une question, oui, je vois qu'Hélène t'a posé une question. Tu peux ouvrir ton micro directement, Hélène, vas-y.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Oui, merci d'abord pour la présentation. J'avais deux petites questions. Je me suis posé la question pourquoi vous aviez comparé à SAEM. Est-ce que vous ne pouviez pas aussi comparer à un algorithme de l'équipe, à Nimrod par exemple? Et je me demandais notamment dans l'application, les estimations qui avaient été obtenues par Chloé, ça avait été fait avec quel algorithme? Avec SAEM aussi ou
Alors, effectivement, l'estimation obtenue par Chloé a été faite aussi avec Nimrod. Donc là, c'est pour des raisons d'efficacité numérique. J'ai utilisé un algo basé sur SAEMX, donc implémenté dans le package SAEMX, parce que ça permettait d'aller plus vite, parce que ça permettait d'obtenir des estimations plus rapidement. Ensuite, ici, vu qu'on considère, dans les estimations que j'ai montrées, on ne considère pas de prior. Alors, Nimrod est basé sur une estimation, enfin, c'est basé sur un maximum a posteriori. Mais en l'absence de prior, maximum a posteriori et vraisemblance reviennent au même. Donc, utiliser SAEM ou Nimrod, normalement, Nimrod et SAEM sont censés, dans ce cas-là, minimiser ou maximiser la même fonction. Donc, il n'y aurait pas de différence. Mais effectivement, si on utilise un prior, et ce qui a été utilisé par Chloé dans ses applications, alors là, effectivement, il y aurait des différences. Donc, c'est prévu au programme d'utiliser d'autres algorithmes, comparer avec d'autres algorithmes. Mais c'est juste que là, pour les besoins de temps de calcul, on a pris quelque chose qui tournait plus vite.
Et du coup, question aussi, en termes de temps de calcul, qu'est-ce que ça donne cet algorithme par rapport à...
Alors, c'est là que le bas blesse, ça prend du temps. Quand même, c'est-à-dire qu'il faut résoudre des problèmes de contrôle optimaux. Et alors, même si les méthodes numériques sont quand même efficaces, ça demande de résoudre, par exemple, si on a une équation différentielle de dimension D, en fait, il faut résoudre en même temps un problème de contrôle. En fait, résoudre le problème de contrôle revient à résoudre une équation différentielle de taille D au carré. Donc, ça prend quand même un peu de temps. Donc, en paralysant, on s'en sort et on arrive à obtenir des estimations de l'ordre ici de quelques heures. Mais quand même, c'est long. Et surtout, c'est codé en R. Donc, ce n'est pas le langage optimal pour faire du calcul de matrices et ce genre de choses. Donc, on peut gagner un peu de temps peut-être en utilisant un meilleur langage. Mais c'est vrai que ça vient avec un prix à payer. Le fait qu'on tienne en compte l'erreur de mesure, enfin l'erreur de modèle, qu'on minimise sur les conditions initiales, vient avec un prix à payer en termes de calcul. On ne peut pas faire ça.
Merci.
Ok, merci Hélène pour ces questions. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Donc n'hésitez pas, soit vous ouvrez votre micro, soit vous pouvez les taper dans la conversation de groupe. Moi, j'avais une petite question, Quentin. Alors, je ne sais pas si c'est passé un peu vite, peut-être tu l'as dit, mais vous avez pu calculer des taux de couverture aussi pour vos résultats là ou...
Ça, c'est vraiment le truc qui fait mal parce qu'on essaye, on commence à voir des choses, mais on a eu beaucoup de problèmes de stabilité numérique. Alors, formellement, on peut, à partir des équations qu'on a, définir un estimateur de variance-covariance, voilà, un estimateur de la variance, et donc, à partir de là, aussi proposer un estimateur des taux de couverture. En pratique, il y a d'énormes problèmes de stabilité numérique qui se posent. On a commencé à les régler, ils sont réglés dans le cas des modèles linéaires. Ils commencent à être réglés dans la plupart des problèmes non linéaires, enfin dans les modèles non linéaires, pardon, mais c'est quand même très compliqué.
Ok. Est-ce que vous avez d'autres questions?
Moi, juste Quentin, parce qu'en fait, là, en re-regardant l'échelle des graphiques, donc quand tu montres U, donc la différence entre tes modèles et enfin, la déviation dont tu aurais besoin, voilà ça, là, par exemple, enfin, l'un des deux, enfin, voilà. Quand on regarde l'échelle, en fait, dans mes souvenirs, c'était beaucoup plus grand. Mais en fait, là, on voit que la déviation, bon, déjà, elle contient le zéro, comme tu l'as dit, donc finalement, elle n'est pas si significative d'un point de vue populationnel. Mais ensuite, même pour les individus, tu vois, l'échelle, c'est 0,01. Donc, c'est quand même pas très grand, j'ai la sensation. Alors, c'est bien sûr à mettre au regard de la magnitude du phénomène qu'on observe. Mais est-ce que du coup, on pourrait construire un indicateur ou au moins avoir une règle du pouce pour savoir si cette différence elle est significative et si vraiment il faut la prendre comme une vraie erreur de spécification, par exemple, ou si au contraire, bon, bah, c'est lié au bruit, enfin, c'est un peu plus anecdotique.
Alors, effectivement, comparé au graphe que je t'avais montré avant, l'erreur pour donc le terme d'erreur de modèle est plus petit parce que c'est basé maintenant sur la langue transforme des données. Et ça donne un modèle qui est bien plus adéquat pour décrire les données. Donc, l'erreur de modèle commise est beaucoup plus petite.
Donc, c'est plutôt une bonne nouvelle pour les modèles de Chloé et les
C'est
estimations qu'on
plutôt une
avait
bonne
faites.
nouvelle. Et comme j'ai dit, effectivement, au niveau de la population, enfin, au niveau des sujets, sujet par sujet, on voit une erreur, ce qui était attendu, mais effectivement, si on faisait un test statistique en partant de l'hypothèse que le modèle est bon, on conclurait qu'il n'y a pas de raison de changer cette hypothèse, au vu de l'erreur moyenne qui est commise. Ensuite, comment faire des tests de manière sérialisée? Pour l'instant, je n'ai pas d'idée, mais c'est vrai que ce serait super d'en faire à partir des UI qu'on obtient à la fin. On a envie, par exemple, de faire l'hypothèse, pour savoir si le modèle est bon, de faire l'hypothèse que en fait, les UI à la fin, ils sont de moyenne 0 et faire un test statistique à partir des différentes réalisations estimées et voir si c'est le cas. Ça pourrait être un truc qu'on peut regarder. Mais ça demanderait de faire des hypothèses, on n'y est pas encore, parce que ça demanderait de faire des hypothèses supplémentaires sur la distribution de la perturbation. Là, on se contente juste de dire qu'elle existe et qu'on en tient compte pour l'estimation. Si on voulait s'en servir pour faire des tests statistiques, il faudrait commencer à faire des hypothèses sur la distribution des différentes perturbations. Et en plus, vu que les UI sont des fonctions, ça commencerait faudrait commencer à regarder la statistique, enfin des statistiques dans des espaces fonctionnels. Il y a des choses qui sont faites là-dessus, comme les papiers de Dashti et de Stuart, mais c'est pas drôle à lire, mais il faudra qu'on y vienne, mais c'est pas pour tout de suite. Enfin, mais c'est un truc qu'on pourrait regarder, ouais, sur du moyen terme.
Ok.
Ok, est-ce qu'il y a une dernière question? Non, mais voilà, j'ai l'impression que tout le monde a eu les réponses à ces questions. Ben, Quentin, merci encore pour cette présentation.
Merci à vous.